Okay, Angelo. So happy to have you with us tonight, and thank you so much for your time to be able to be with this beautiful group, see so many amazing friends and amazing colleagues that we know, which I'm sure we'll chat with later after your webinar. I'm going to do an intro for our YouTube audience. So, Angelo, you are a certified nutritional consulting practitioner, so you're with the IONC,
yes.
Which is excellent, and you're a CNP. You graduated, as we were saying, in 2001. So you've been in the field for 20 years. You are always, which we know from the courses that you teach, working on the latest research on effective supplement strategies, as well as current diet trends. You have a practice, a consulting practice called Enhanced Diet Solutions, where you create individualized nutrition plans for people who live active lifestyles. So if I remember, you're working with athletes or those who are participating in some sort of performance. You can correct me if that is not true. And you teach fitness and sports for how many years now?
Oh my goodness, we're going on 13 years.
13 years, yes. And you've been teaching the continuing education programs, fat loss, for a number of years. And now your pride and joy, the complete Ketogenic, will be launched. And in your bio here that we have on our website as well, you've worked with running rooms, all kinds of fitness institutions. You've been on radio, TV, etc. for interviews. I want to thank you for being with us. We're very proud that you are a longtime faculty member with IHN. So please, if you wouldn't mind, share your wisdom with us this evening.
Well, thank you very much, Julia. Yeah, basically, as Julia was saying, I'm part of the walls at IHN. Now I'm part of the virtual reality of IHN. And it's a great pleasure to keep everybody in the loop regarding nutrition trends, specifically with sports and sport nutrition and diets and so on and so forth. It's a pride and joy of mine, this new inaugural continuing education course that I've developed. Took me a while. Took me a while. I'm one man, but I was having fun doing it. It was there were some challenges developing it, but once you get the core of the information, then you can formulate a plan to move forward regarding how the course is going to be laid out. So essentially, what's going to happen tonight is a synopsis, a tip of the iceberg sort of webinar that's going to pique everybody's interest, because a lot of people are talking about this, and I want to pretty much set the record straight on certain points that I'll be talking about tonight. And so for all the attendees, settle in, grab your cup of coffee, grab your tea, whatever you want, and pretty much enjoy the show. Okay, so I am going to start basically with the intro. Basically, I call it Complete Ketogenic, a primer about being in ketosis. As I said before, this is a tip of the iceberg webinar, but it's going to give you a lot of information to help you make a decision moving forward. So without further ado, let's look at what this has to offer here. So essentially, what we're looking at is, what is being in ketosis? Okay, it is a natural metabolic state. It involves the body producing ketone bodies out of fat, all right, and using them for energy instead of carbohydrates. You can get into ketosis by following a very low carb, high fat ketogenic diet. Bottom line, ketosis is a metabolic state where ketones become the main sources of energy for the body and brain. And this happens when carb intake and insulin levels are very low. So Listen, a natural metabolic state. I want to emphasize that, because a lot of individuals and even people that are against this type of diet think that it's not a natural metabolic state, that it's some sort of emergency backup plan that your body has in case there's danger, you can't have any food, or you don't have any sleep, or even when you're in sleep, how do you think the brain gets fuel when you're sleeping? That's part of it. So it is a natural metabolic state. You're forcing the body to use fats for fuels, plain and simple. There's nothing else elaborate about it. Basically what it is not a low carb diet or a traditional low carb diet per se. It is a high fat diet void of carbohydrates and with very little proteins to come along with it. So essentially you have main energy source for the body and the brain, specifically the brain, because the brain cannot use fat as fuel. The liver has to convert that fat into ketones. And once that happens, then the brain can actively uptake those ketones and utilize it for fuel. Okay? And the main primer here is that insulin levels are very low as a result of this particular diet. Now, what are the macronutrient ratios of the keto diet? I'm going to go through several different ones and just explain it a little bit, because sometimes there is confusion, and the reason why we have to look at it this way is because it's not like any other type of diet. It's unique in and of itself, but I'll get into it. So how I break it down is pretty much by percentages. Everybody knows the zone diet, 40, 30, 30. Well, basically, keto diet is essentially 80% fat, 15% protein, 5% carbohydrates, give or take. Now, this isn't always the case. Traditional ketogenic diets for children that had epilepsy, and we're talking way back in the 1950s and even further back, was 90% fat, 10% protein, and less than 5% carbohydrates, which is very, very extreme, but it is a medical condition, and you need to take sometimes extreme dietary measures to reduce the frequency of these seizures. So ketogenic diets have been used for a long time, basically for neurological issues, but more on that later. So that's keto in a nutshell. A lot of people, before I continue, a lot of people will not go as strict as 80% fat. They'll go 70 or 75% fat, which gives them a little more play or leeway room to have a little bit more carbohydrates in the diet, which is fine because they're still going to hit ketosis because of just the sheer amount of calories coming from fat, okay? Second to that is carnivore. People know of the carnivore diet, 60% plus fat, protein 20 to 40%, and carbohydrates less than 1%. Why is that? Because basically all you're doing is eating animal products. That's it. You're not having any fiber, you're not having any form of carbohydrate, nothing. Now, it's higher on the protein level. And can you get into ketosis and carnivore? You can if you eat more fattier cuts of meat. But a lot of the times, individuals will use carnivore for autoimmune issues. I've read a few reports that it can help with those particular ailments. But is it sustainable? That is a question that only an individual can answer. Because you don't necessarily have to be on carnivore. You don't even have to be on keto. But for the sake of having a more balanced approach between fat and protein, keto fits the bill pretty well, and I'll get into it later on. In terms of low carb, 55 to 75% is coming from fat, protein 15 to 30%, and carbs 10 to 15%. Interesting, because the traditional low carb diet, everybody knows Robert Atkins, okay, the Atkins diet. Now, I don't know if Robert Atkins realized this, or maybe he didn't want to follow through on it when he did it, when he came out with the new diet revolution, and everybody was going crazy with the Atkins diet in the 90s. But his induction phase is basically this. First 2 weeks of the Robert Atkins low carb diet is basically you're in ketosis. And after the 2 weeks induction phase, you increase the protein level, still keep the fat high and keep the carbs about 10 to 15%. So he swapped fat for a little bit more protein, but kept the carbohydrates low. I guess what he didn't realize is, hey, what if I extended it past 2 weeks? And what if I did it for 2 months or 4 or 6 months at high fat induction? Maybe he would have been stumbling onto something else as well. But lo and behold, we have keto, okay? And bodybuilders were using this type of strategy, low carb and keto, before competition. So, I mean, from my sports background, I'm getting into that. But the point is here, these are 2 other distinctions regarding low carbohydrate dieting. And lastly is moderate carb paleo, 40 to 65% fat. Protein is 20 to 30% carbohydrates, 15 to 30% carbohydrates, up to 150-ish grams of carbs. It depends. Paleo diets are very clean. Basically, it's synonymous with CrossFit. CrossFit and paleo dieting go hand in hand in a lot of fitness circles. Nothing wrong with this diet. It's completely fine. It's pretty balanced, but you really don't get into ketosis with this type of diet. Quite simply because there is simply not enough fat, even though it goes as high as 65%. So there's another distinction of a type of not so much low carbohydrate diet, but high fat with certain specific types of carbohydrates that are natural, not processed, so on and so forth. So essentially what you're looking at is, can a person achieve a state of ketosis with any of these or other diets besides keto? Yes, but there is a catch. This is the catch. If you're gonna be on a ketogenic diet, that means you have to be in ketosis. You can't just be in ketosis for a couple of days and then get out and then not have certain factors come in. You have to be in ketosis on a steady basis. That is the essence of the ketogenic diet. You want to use ketones day in and day out, right? So in that case there, if you use carnivore, low carb, or the traditional paleo, you'll be in and out of ketosis. You won't be in there full stop. And why is that important? Because there are many aspects of being in ketosis that can help from a health perspective, from a holistic perspective, not just talking about fat loss. Because a lot of people that are on ketogenic dieting or ketogenic diets right now are using it for basically fat loss. And that's great. If they can stick to it, that's great. But it has other health implications, which I'm going to talk about as well. Okay? So essentially, the macronutrient ratios are high fat, low protein, and very low carbohydrate. Okay? So the essence is this. How does ketosis actually work? Okay, well, we'll get into it now. So I have a slide here. You guys can all see it. Very simplistic, and I'll just describe the pictures for you, because when it's too many words, it's too many words. I'm already talking enough. But anyway, deplete glycogen. Okay, glycogen. What is glycogen? For those of you who remember, glycogen is a storage form of energy coming from carbohydrates or sugars. It's basically stored sugar. So what you're doing is you're depleting that stored sugar. You're depleting those stored sources, which the muscle and the liver are the main tissues and organ that actually store glycogen. Upwards of almost up to 4,000 calories can be stored regarding glycogen, as low as 2,000 calories for smaller individuals can be stored as glycogen. You have to deplete that because the body wants to run on fats. Okay, so by inadvertently lowering carbohydrates and increasing fat intake above 70% of one's caloric intake, that is essentially what the individual is doing. Once that process is done, then the body can start breaking down fats. So it's starting to use another fuel, fats, in this case, to actually get things moving, okay, and to keep the process going. One interesting thing that happens, though, is in this process, people talk about the keto flu and, certain issues related to ketogenic dieting, and that's all fine and dandy. It's a little bit drawn out process to explain here in an hour, but that can be overcome using various methods. But what ends up happening is that your liver will start making ketones. And with these ketones being made, now the brain has a source of fuel that it can actually utilize and keep the body going. So, which is an interesting concept because we've been doing this forever. Babies, for instance, are in ketosis for a long period of time, simply because they can't feed themselves. So they're in ketosis for a long period of time, right? Why do you think babies have so much body fat in their frame or don't have as much muscle mass? They're utilizing their own fat stores to survive. If we didn't have this miraculous body that utilizes ketones, we'd be dead a long time ago. So very interesting the way the body utilizes this process. So there are a lot of people that say, it's not I'm on keto, as many people say, it's more like I'm in ketosis, okay? That is the proper terminology. That is what's actually happening in the body, right? But what does ketosis mean? Well, basically, ketone bodies are produced when the body metabolizes or breaks down fat. The cells are able to utilize these ketones as fuel to help power everyday functions, i.e. the brain. So a ketogenic diet is one in which glucogenic substrates, non-fiber carbs, and glucogenic amino acids are low enough to force the body to rely primarily on fat as fuel and increase the production of ketone bodies. So if you don't have, if you're void of carbohydrates and you don't have too much protein, the body has no choice but to utilize fats. Okay, glucogenic amino acids, basically, you can eat a lot of protein and the body will utilize that and convert it into sugar. Well, there's not a lot of protein on the ketogenic diet. It's not a high protein diet. It's a high fat diet. So that's out of the question. And non-fiber carbohydrates, what are they? They're processed carbohydrates, right? They're grains, things like that. And fruits, high sugar fruits, things like that. So those carbohydrates will have some fiber, but it will spike insulin, and that's a no-no, specifically on this particular diet, okay? So what are the three ketone bodies? Because everybody's like, okay, well, ketones, what are they? Well, essentially, you got three. You have acetoacetate, you've got beta-hydroxybutyrate, more on that later, and then you have acetone. Note that acetone is produced by breaking down acetoacetate, but it can be considered a ketone body. Okay, so these are the main three circulating ketones within the body. And there are certain testing methods in which individuals can use to make sure that they're in ketosis. That is the problem that a lot of people have. It's not necessarily a problem. Maybe they didn't do enough reading. But in order to maintain ketosis, there has to be a way of testing it. Just like a diabetic tests their blood sugar with glucometers. People that are in ketosis can test it with keto meters. So I'll talk about that a little later. So how do we measure if we are in ketosis? Well, beta-hydroxybutyrate in blood, test by a finger prick, the most abundant in the body. That's why this is probably the most popular testing method. It's the most accurate testing method because you're looking at massive circulating BHB in the body. The second one is acetoacetate. That is a urine test by urine strips. Not bad, but it can fluctuate in ketone levels depending on the day and what was eaten. And then lastly is acetone in breath. Test by breath meter, the least abundant in the body. I wouldn't utilize this at all because it's not a great testing method by any means. It's fine, but it's not the greatest. BHB in the blood is the best in terms of the finger prick. So the unit of measure, if anybody's interested, in order how to read it, is millimolar per liter. Okay, so how a state of ketosis is induced, how high a person's blood ketones are, and what benefits are achieved from that degree of ketosis. Vary widely from individual to individual. So you can have someone that's an exerciser, may have higher amounts of ketones in the blood. Why? Because they've just squeezed out every last drop of glycogen, possibly. An obese or overweight individual may have different levels as well. So it varies from individual to individual, but there is a range, and I'll talk about that shortly. Testing is often done on ketone meters. Similar to glucose meters, 3 measurements for references are, and we'll look at it because at least you can differentiate what's happening between normal carbohydrate diets and ketogenics. So normal carbohydrate diets, the ketone level range is 0 to 0.4 millimolar per liter. That's usually standard. Glucose level range is 80 to 120. And blood pH, there is no change. And I'll talk about blood pH as well. I keep getting ahead of myself, but you'll see why. Prolonged fasting and ketogenic dieting. So this is what we're looking at here. The ketone level range is 0.5 to 7 millimolar per liter. So there is the range. A lot of people hover around 3.5, 4 millimolar per liter. To get to 0.5, some people are very genetically inclined, let's say, to get that low. Glucose level range is 60 to 120, and the pH, there is no change. Okay, so the glucose level is slightly less. And what a lot of people get confused between being in a ketogenic state is the misrepresentation of ketoacidosis. Look at the difference here. Over 15 to 25 millimolar per liter when you're in ketoacidosis. Glucose level over 200. And blood pH is very low, and it can be fatal. Listen, if someone says the ketogenic diet is dangerous, they're probably thinking that, oh, you're in ketoacidosis. You're not in ketosis. They're not the same thing. They are absolutely not the same thing. Ketoacidosis is not the same as ketosis. It's a life-threatening condition resulting from dangerously high levels of ketones and blood sugar. When you're in ketosis, you don't have high blood sugar. That's not what's happening here. It's a seesaw effect. So someone that is a diabetic, that's taking insulin, that's type 1 diabetic specifically, will have and can get into ketoacidosis. And blood pH is very stable. The body does not want to change that every so often. It's very constant. But can you imagine blood pH in the acidic state? You're going to die. But then if it's too alkaline, you're also going to die. It can also be fatal. So blood pH should remain constant. And that's the difference between ketoacidosis and ketosis. Ketoacidosis messes around with the blood pH, and that's where the problems start. Okay, so that is the difference between ketoacidosis and ketosis. Now, a little history for you. It wasn't until the 1950s that it was discovered that our bodies can use ketones as an alternative energy source. Okay, it's not that very long ago. In 1915, Dr. Francois Bennett published a paper that revealed the body can only hold a limited supply of glycogen, about 2,000 calories worth. Now that was back in 1915. A little research and studies have changed. Now there's a wide variance there. It can go upwards of 4,000 calories with larger individuals, but it's a very finite. It's a small amount. That's nothing. 2,000 to 4,000 calories can be depleted like that in an exercise session that lasts an hour and a half. So that is not a lot to hang the hat on. But fat, on the other hand, and for those of you that have taken my fitness and sport nutrition course, you know where I'm going with this one. You know, our bodies can have as much as 150,000 calories worth of fat storage. Hence why the ketogenic diet is popular with certain athletes. I'll get to that a little later on. So ketones were thought of a toxic byproduct because of high ketone levels in diabetics. But around the 1960s, after the work of George Khalil, it was thought that ketones were an alternative fuel source. So yes, they can be an alternative fuel source, or they can be a main fuel source. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. You know when it's an alternative fuel source? When we're sleeping. Okay, we're sleeping for 7 to 8 hours a night, hopefully. Well, these times, I don't know who's sleeping. But anyways, basically, when you're in that state, your brain is using ketones. You're in a fasted state. You're not eating anything. If it wasn't using ketones, we'd be in a coma. We'd be done. So ketones are very valuable when you have alternative fuel sources, or when it's a main fuel source, or it's on the back burner because individuals are consuming a lot of carbohydrates. Okay, so it's something that naturally occurs from the body. Okay, now I wanted to show this slide because going back to the testing, these are the most popular testing keto meters that are on the market. I've seen the one on the top right, the Freestyle Precision Neo. That's the one that's available behind most pharmacy counters. The Precision Extra is the one used as well, pretty popular. And Keto Mojo, they've done a lot of advertising for this one here online that tests both ketones and blood glucose. So you really can't go wrong with any of these three when your clients are on or in a ketogenic diet and you need to recommend something for them. These three are the ones that I would recommend. There are a lot of them on the market, but these three are the ones that I would recommend, and these are all blood-related tests, okay? Test kits. So what are the health applications of the ketogenic diet? I told you in the beginning that the ketogenic diet isn't just for fat loss. It's basically, there are health applications, and there are studies to prove it. So let's start with type 2 diabetes, for instance. Obviously, low carbohydrate diets work to treat type 2 diabetes. But what will happen when we are in deeper ketosis? So everybody knows about HbA1c. This is a form of hemoglobin that develops when glucose molecules bind to hemoglobin, a protein within red blood cells, if people remember iron and hemoglobin. So because red blood cells live for 3 months, a person's HbA1c levels gives an average of blood sugar levels over the previous 3 months. Low carbohydrate studies have demonstrated improvements not only in blood glucose, but also in HbA1c levels. And that's very important because, you can test your blood 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and it's a little bit high or within range, but a little higher within range, but you don't really know over the long term. That's why this test is very important to determine pre-diabetic tendencies. So HbA1c levels of 6.5% and above are a sign of type 2 diabetes, whereas lower than 6% are considered normal. Study in 2005 by Bolden et al. Found that unrestricted ketogenic diet, eating as much as you want, improved insulin sensitivity and improved HbA1c levels. Another study by Yancey et al. In 2004 reported lower body weight, triglyceride levels, lower medication, and lower HbA1c levels. A study showed that diets with the highest fat intake to the lowest intake of carbohydrates resulted in higher HDL levels, and that was an older study back in 1988. What's the point of this? Listen, it's not just good enough to be, individuals can go on low carbohydrate dieting and not be in ketosis and probably have similar results. Here's the thing. Being in ketosis, that first study by Bolden in 2005, look at the brackets. Eat as much as you want. So ad libitum, unrestricted ketogenic diet improves insulin sensitivity, improves HbA1c levels. What does that mean? They can eat as much as they want. Now, a nice side effect of the ketogenic diet is it's satiating. So individuals will probably slightly undereat for their height, weight, and age, and improve all those blood markers while feeling satisfied. That's the difference. Low carbohydrate dieting, on the other hand, may not have enough fat to keep a person sustained. So if you do something like ad libitum, eat as much as you want, they may overeat, and some markers may go down, some markers may stay the same. So ketogenic dieting has that advantage over just standard low carbohydrate dieting regarding diabetes and blood sugar. In another study, overweight subjects were placed on a ketogenic diet with no limit on caloric intake once again, okay? Results showed lower total cholesterol, decreased LDL, and in specifically decreased small particle LDL, which is the one that causes a lot of the cholesterol issues, increased HDL, total ratios of LDL to HDL also improved. So when you have overweight subjects, and they may have another issue like diabetes, so a lot of people that are overweight may have insulin sensitivity issues. This is a diet that can probably save their life or make them live longer than they were probably going to with their standard diet, okay? So that was pretty interesting. But like I said, there's a lot of research on type 2 diabetes and diets. Ketogenic is just one of those diets that are really showing promise. Regarding weight loss, and I've already mentioned this before, but hey, everybody likes a good story on weight loss, so I'm going to tell it. A new study compared the ketogenic diet to a diet based on the American Diabetes Association's Create Your Plate program in individuals with type 2 diabetes. After 32 weeks, the subjects who followed the ketogenic diet lost significantly more weight, 28 pounds to be exact, than those following the 8-day program of 6.6 pounds. Now, the 88 program is a lowered carbohydrate, complex carbohydrate type diet that has moderate fat and moderate protein, which there's nothing wrong with that. But when individuals lose weight, and it doesn't have to be a type 2 diabetic, part of that weight loss is water loss, because when we looked at, getting into a ketogenic state, you got to lose a lot of glycogen. Well, glycogen holds on to water. That's body weight. So being in ketosis gets rid of and sheds a lot of that water. And then if you keep going into ketosis, you're burning fats. So inevitably, you're going to be lowering your body fat percentage, and then the overall health markers will improve. In another study with obese individuals with type 2 diabetes, the ketogenic diet was shown to be a safe and effective weight loss strategy. So if you're a type 2 diabetic, or you know anybody that's a type 2 diabetic that's overweight, this may be the plan for them if all the other health parameters are okay. Note, any client on diabetic medication should work with their doctor before reducing or even discontinuing use. No diet is perfect, and individuals on low carb or ketogenic diets can respond differently. That is very true. I am not here to preach the ketogenic diet. I utilize the ketogenic diet for clients more recently, and I've tried it myself as a tool. That's all it is. It's a tool. The diet is only as good as compliance. So if the person can comply on a paleo type diet and improves their health, go right ahead, no problem. If they can comply with a ketogenic diet, no problem. It's when compliance is low that it's not going to work. And that's the takeaway here, okay? Regarding Parkinson's disease, now, before I get into this, ketogenic dieting for neurological issues is pretty much a godsend to a lot of individuals when medications have failed. So ketogenic dieting is well beyond fat loss and weight loss. It's also to do with neurological issues and many other issues, which I can't cover, impossible, but I'll give you a synopsis later on. So Parkinson's disease, characterized by substantial death of dopamine-producing cells in the substantia nigra, dysfunctional proteins called Lewy bodies. Inflammation also occurs, impaired mitochondrial function occurs, increased reactive oxygen species, which are pretty much free radicals, and resulting dysregulation of motor function, okay? Twitches, things like that. So here's a schematic of dopamine levels in a normal and Parkinson's affected neuron, right? There's the Lewy body, which is the negative proteins there. Dopamine under normal conditions flow into the receptor, and you've got good feedback. There's not a lot of dopamine happening with Parkinson's affected neurons, and then the receptor doesn't relay that information, and then you have issues down the road. And Parkinson's disease, you've got substantia nigra, there's the dopamine producing cells that have been altered in Parkinson's. So one theory is that the dopamine producing cells in the substantia nigra deteriorate, and due to a lack of energy from impaired mitochondrial function. All right? Remember the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, okay? It produces energy. Mitochondria produces reactive oxygen species, and overproduction can damage tissue and DNA, and that's what's happening in Parkinson's, okay? Individuals with Parkinson's have a reduction in brain glucose metabolism, so the brains aren't taking up glucose effectively. In addition, patients with Parkinson's have also impaired autophagy, which leads to an accumulation of damaged proteins called Lewy bodies, leading to neurodegeneration. Let me backtrack a little bit, all right? Remember, a reduction in brain glucose metabolism. Okay, so how do you fix that? Well, glucose can't be your primary source fuel anymore. Your brain does not function well on it. In comes the ketogenic diet. Now the brain can start using ketones. And when the brain starts using ketones, guess what? Autophagy starts taking place. And I'm sure you've probably heard of this term before. Dr. Jason Fung, which is a kidney specialist, which specializes in diabetics, has used fasting to spur on autophagy and improve health parameters. Well, the ketogenic diet can also help to do that as well, because individuals are utilizing less calories on average on the diet because of the saturation point or the fullness factor. And being in a state of ketosis spurs that on, within the cell, okay? So that also helps with Parkinson's. So being in ketosis may help. Research indicate that ketogenic dieting and exogenous ketones may improve mitochondrial energy production, and ketones may increase the formation of new mitochondria in various neurological disorders. Imagine that, producing new mitochondria, more energy for the brain, lower symptomatics. So essentially, this diet may help individuals to that extent reduce the symptoms and severity of Parkinson's. So conclusions. Ketogenic dieting and exogenous ketones have been demonstrated to improve symptoms in humans by about 45% in as little as 28 days. Animal models have shown that being in ketosis and the administration of exogenous ketones can prevent declines in ATP. Remember ATP, that's the basically energy current. Increases mitochondrial function, lower inflammation, and improve motor function. Many more well-designed studies in human populations would be needed before a specific conclusion can be drawn. That is true. I mean, having animal studies done is great, but we are not rodents, all right? We have a different DNA structure, and we respond differently when it crosses over to human trials. So, but this is very promising news regarding being in ketosis, okay? Here's the bread and butter of the ketogenic diet, is individuals with epilepsy, all right? It may be associated with enhanced excitatory amino acid transmission, as it's called, impaired inhibitory transmission, or abnormal electrical properties of the affected cells. The glutamate content, which is an amino acid, in areas surrounding epileptic focus is often raised. Range from a brief lapse of attention to a convulsion, several minutes, depends on the function of the region of the brain that is affected. Okay, so it's a complex scenario that happens in epilepsy. And regarding the ketogenic diet, as I mentioned in the intro, I believe, it was first started with epileptic seizures in children, and it worked pretty well in reducing the severity and amount of epileptic seizures. It doesn't cross over too well when you've got epilepsy in adults. It's a little bit different, quite simply because of brain development into adulthood. But let's look at the different regions of the brain. So the affected brain regions, motor cortex, and usually involves convulsion. The hypothalamus, which is the peripheral autonomic discharge, heartbeat, blood flow, breathing, digestion, okay? And then the reticular formation in the upper brain stem, okay? Loss of consciousness, all right? So these are three of the affected brain regions that being in a ketogenic state can actually help. Now, this is a slide that has a lot of writing on it. So let me just break this down a little bit for you. But I thought it was pretty unique because it really breaks down the medical model and what can be done alternatively. So most people living with epilepsy have seizures that can be controlled by anti-seizure drugs. Okay, there are a few on the market. But 1 in 3 people continue to have seizures despite taking anti-seizure drugs. This is known as drug-resistant epilepsy and may require a different type of treatment for seizure control, right? So in the darker purple label there, if you are not seizure-free after trying 2 anti-seizure drugs, you have the right to be referred to an epileptic specialist to talk to you about treatment options. So here are the 4 progressive steps. Number 1, diagnose with epilepsy. Step 2, try drug, still having seizures. Step 3, try the second drug, still having seizures. After step 3, here we go. Talk to your doctor about referral to an epileptic specialist where they can suggest that being in a state of ketosis may help because these models here did not. Remember, okay? So 1 in 3 people continue to have seizures despite taking anti-seizure drugs. That's crazy. That's 33%. Okay, so that's not a small percentage. Now, in developing my course, I looked at the Charlie Foundation, which is an organization that helps with childhood epileptic seizures. So here are the frequently asked questions about keto and treating kids with epilepsy, because we keep talking about adults and adult nutrition. So we're going to switch gears a little bit here and talk about kids. So will anti-seizure medication be reduced after my child goes on the diet? That's a very valid question. If the child is on more than 1 anti-seizure medication, 1 may be reduced as the child starts the ketogenic diet. The reduction of the remaining seizure medication may be made if the child's seizures improve over time. Some children are able to have the medications completely discontinued. Medications may act stronger with the ketogenic diet, therefore close medical monitoring is necessary. We as nutritionists always take careful consideration of our clients. And if they are on any medications, we always are wary of that and work or should be working in tandem with their medical professional. Okay. I'm not saying that we should solely work with them. I would encourage medical intervention along with us to get the proper health outcomes for these individuals, for these children. Okay. So once again, may act stronger on the ketogenic diet, quite simply because of the chemical reactions that are happening in the brain. How do you begin the diet? The diet is started under close medical supervision. The diet is begun gradually and increased to a full amount over a 3 to 4 day period or longer. During this time, blood sugar and ketone levels are monitored. A fasting period is not necessary to start the diet according to recent studies. A side note, a lot of people that start this ketogenic diet, and this is not individuals that have epileptic seizures, just anybody that starts the ketogenic diet, they want to fast track it. And the one way to fast track the ketogenic diet is doing intermittent fasting with keto. And for those of you who don't know what intermittent fasting is basically eating in a small window of time during your waking hours and around the clock. So some people may fast for 16 hours at a time and only have an 8-hour window to eat. And they find that, it suits their lifestyle. When you're doing that, your body is forced to use ketones at a specific rate because you're not eating for a substantial amount of hours. Combine that with high fat, low carb, and moderate protein, and you're supercharging your way to getting into ketosis quicker. For kids, not needed. Not needed at all because ketosis is going to happen if the diet is done properly. That's just a side note for those of you who don't realize that you can get into ketosis just by fasting. How soon does it take for the diet to reduce or eliminate seizures? The diet can become effective immediately or can take several months. Each person is unique and has different seizure patterns and frequency. There's usually an improvement within the first 10 weeks on the ketogenic diet. Some people will say, wow, that's pretty long. Well, it's not. If the person's had seizures all their life, what's 10 weeks? It's nothing. And plus the body has to adapt. There's an adaptive phase that the body goes through to get into ketosis. Okay. So once that is achieved, then it's a lot easier to stick to the diet and hunger patterns start to change, which is actually favorable to the patient. So for kids, they'll be eating and they'll feel satisfied with every meal because those fats are nourishing the brain, nourishing the nervous system, and causing controlled hunger patterns. Otherwise, if someone or any child, if anybody has a child, knows full well that if they're consuming high refined carbohydrates, they're probably going to be hungry in another 20 minutes, maybe less, because it just isn't satiating enough. So that's another plus or bonus when someone is on ketosis. 4, what would happen if my child cheated on his or her diet? If someone ate or drank something that was not part of his or her diet, they could experience a seizure within a short period of time. Most definitely, remember that the brain cannot utilize glucose in this state very well to begin with. So if they get off and they're kicked out of ketosis, then you're back to the old patterns again, and the frequency may increase once again. So that is essentially what is going on with that experience. Number 5, is the diet healthy for my child? The diet alone does not contain enough vitamins or minerals, and nutritional deficiency could develop without supplements. Special vitamin and mineral supplements are prescribed for each child while on the ketogenic diet, and it's also important to drink adequate liquids while on the diet. Beyond this particular problem or issue, such as epileptic seizures, I don't recommend individuals go on the diet past 3 months, maybe 6 months. I've known individuals that have been on this diet for over 2 years and no issues, but they take careful consideration of what they're eating. So as holistic nutritionists, we have to look at the holistic approach of the ketogenic diet. A lot of people that start a ketogenic diet, I mean, come on, look, it's not just avocado, bacon, eggs, repeat. Yes, they're high fat, low protein, no carbohydrates, and you can have that morning, noon, and night. But is that healthy? No, it's not. The ketogenic diet is more than that. You know, there are a variety of foods that individuals can eat, right, to stay in ketosis. And what a lot of people disregard sometimes are green leafies, all right, the leafy vegetables. They have a high fiber content, will not spike insulin, will keep the person in ketosis, provide fiber, provide minerals, nutrients like sodium and potassium, which, by the way, are the main electrolytes that are needed within the keto diet. You lose a lot of those electrolytes, and that's part of why individuals complain about the keto flu or not feeling good or feeling under the weather when they're transitioning into ketosis. It's because they're not doing it right. So with kids, special consideration has to be taken regarding dietary supplements. That's all I'm going to say for that topic because it's very complex. Number 6, how long is the diet used for? Diet is generally used for a period of up to 3 years if it is helpful in reducing or eliminating seizures. If the diet is not helpful, it will be stopped within a few months. Why not shorter than a few months? Because you want that adaptogenic phase to take hold. You want the person to be in ketosis to see if there are any changes in the frequency in the seizures. That's why it takes within a few months. Number 7, will the diet cause high cholesterol? Most people do not develop high cholesterol levels while on the diet. Lipid levels are drawn prior to starting the diet and at regular intervals throughout the course of the diet. If a child develops high cholesterol or lipids, the diet can be modified such as including omega-3 fatty acids, probiotics, and fiber. Okay. I've had a few clients go on the ketogenic diet and have their blood work done by their medical professional. And quite the opposite has happened. Their triglyceride levels have gone down. Their LDL, HDL ratios have improved. So I've never seen a scenario like that. But then again, I'm only talking about a handful of people so far. So basically, there shouldn't be any worry that it's going to cause high cholesterol. If it does, there's something else going on, possibly. And then it can be stopped with no issues. Or including omega-3 fatty acids is known to help with HDL levels in the blood. So number 8, are there any special tests that are needed before starting the diet? Well, this is a very important question, specifically with kids. There are blood tests that may be needed to determine if the diet is safe to implement. These include metabolic tests to rule out fatty acid disorders or a carnitine deficiency. By the way, these two conditions are very rare. They're not common, okay? The Charlie Foundation believes that a 3-month commitment to the diet is a minimum commitment to allow your body to fully adapt to the new fat-based fuel source. Since most people following a Western diet are not proficient at metabolizing fat optimally, this period allows the body time to become fat adapted, what's called fat adapted, especially when people are on ketogenic, that's the term used, utilizing dietary fat efficiently and effectively. So you need to be fat adapted in order for that to happen. As I said before, for individuals that crave carbohydrates, that are on high carbohydrate diets, that are on the standard American diet, yeah, it's going to take them a little longer because the body's not adapted to utilizing fat as fuel. But once it takes hold, it could take longer for them to be in a fat adapted state. So months, not weeks, is recommended to actually fully fat adapt into the ketogenic diet. Okay. And there's another slide here. I just threw this in here because it's very interesting. Prevalence of seizure triggers amongst people with epilepsy. Look at the top 3: stress, tiredness, lack of sleep. That all affects motor function and neurological function, especially lack of sleep. Forgot medication, change in treatment, feminine periods, emotions, waking up, visual stimuli. There's a lot that goes on here. So it's a very complex condition that has to be monitored closely if you're going to be consulting with anybody that has this. So it's a neurological disorder characterized by recurrent spontaneous seizures that can occur in people in all ages. One of the earliest documented treatments for epilepsy was by Hippocrates, who prescribed fasting as a cure. Incredible. Back then, we're going way back here in time with the father of medicine, Hippocrates, recommending fasting as a cure. Now, they didn't know what the heck ketosis was back then. They had no clue. But fasting, as I said before, creates ketosis. You're not eating anything. And all of a sudden, your blood glucose levels drop. Then what? So now your body's using fats for fuel. And if you do that long enough, your liver's going to start creating ketones. And voila, we have the ketogenic or ketosis state that happens in a fasting state. So yeah, they were onto something way back then. Research demonstrates that a diet that can reduce seizures by more than 50% in up to 55% of patients, and that's a 2014 study, that's recent. Up to 27% of patients experience a greater than 90% reduction in the number of seizures, with many going on to complete remission. Interesting. 2014 and 2010 study there. Data shows that ketone bodies, acetoacetate and acetone, have anticonvulsant effects. ACAC has been shown to impair the release of glutamate in the neurons, and that's what the main problem is when you have these seizures. It has also been suggested that ketone bodies may increase the synthesis of GABA, okay, which can reduce the frequency of seizures, right? GABA aminobutyric acid is the actual term, and it helps with that as well, all right? So a general restriction of glucose may limit a neuron's ability to reach and maintain the high levels of synaptic activity necessary for seizures to occur. So there, it kills it right there. A restriction of glucose limits the neuron's ability to reach and maintain high levels of synaptic activity, right? So that is the death blow that the ketogenic diet delivers to epileptic seizures, okay? One of the most highlighted studies investigated the keto diet in children who were resistant to anti-epileptic drugs. After 3 months on a 4-to-1 keto diet, this is extreme, 90% fat, 10% protein and carbs. Results, 54% of these young patients experienced a greater than 50% decrease in the frequency of seizures. After a year on the diet, 10% of them became seizure-free. That is incredible, and that is the power of this particular diet regarding neurological issues, specifically this. Exogenous ketones in epilepsy. Before I continue with that, because I talked about exogenous ketones in the previous slide, what are they? They are ketones, they are isolated ketones, basically beta-hydroxybutyrate, BHB, is the main ketone that's used in these pills that people can take to induce a state or go into a deeper state of ketosis. So I just wanted to clarify what exogenous ketones were. Basically a supplement that promotes ketogenesis. So acetone and ACAC protect against seizures. For children with epilepsy who may be struggling to follow a keto diet, a combination of low-carb, Atkins-type diets along with exogenous ketones may improve compliance. Okay, so that may be one trick to use. In conclusion, it could be beneficial to begin with a strict approach, fasting followed by ketogenic dieting alongside medium-chain triglycerides and exogenous ketone supplements. Wow, that is a 1-2 punch knockout right there. Then to a more flexible modified Atkins diet and consistent monitoring for compliance. So you want to have a mix of a lot of different things to maintain ketosis as much as possible. So as I was saying, a lot of conditions to help with the keto diet: Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, cancer, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, autism, depression, headaches, and even ADHD. Very interesting. When I was doing the research for ketosis and the ketogenic diet, the traumatic brain injury, you hear a lot about that in sports, right? Contact sports like football, mixed martial arts, things like that. When you're in that state and you get a concussion, and it doesn't matter, you can be in a car accident, you can be concussed. The brain does not utilize glucose very well. Why? Because you've been concussed, you can't move. So the body's trying to stay alive as long as possible. So guess what? It starts incorporating ketones to make the brain alive again while you're in that state until you recover. And then slowly, the body can utilize glucose once again. I thought it was an interesting segment that I stumbled across during my research. Very interesting. But anyway, these are all the other conditions as well. So coming close to the end here, why incorporate MCTs on a ketogenic diet? Medium chain triglycerides, I'm sure you guys have heard of this before. Basically, it's an isolated medium chain triglyceride coming from coconut oil, okay? So MCT oil contains medium chain lengths of fats called triglycerides. Due to their shorter length, MCTs are easily digested, and many health benefits are linked to the way your body processes these fats, all right? Due to their shorter chain length, MCTs travel straight from the gut to the liver and do not require bowel to break down like other long chain fats do. That's why fats are satiating as well. There's a process that goes on, and that helps. Since MCTs enter your cells without being broken down, they can be used as an immediate source of energy, right? That's the beauty of MCTs. MCT oil can increase fat burning and reduce the need for carbs during exercise. However, it is unclear whether it translates into improved exercise performance. MCT oil may improve brain function, which could have benefits for people with epilepsy, Alzheimer's disease, and autism. Okay, so MCT oil added to the ketogenic diet can help. MCT oil contains fatty acids that have been shown to reduce the growth of yeast and bacteria. Overall, MCTs may have a variety of antimicrobial and antifungal effects. That's why MCT oil is also used for Candida albicans, and yeast overgrowth. It's part of a Candida protocol. For many of you have probably realized that while using MCT. MCT oil may reduce heart disease risk factors such as weight, cholesterol, and inflammation. Adding it to your diet could help lower the risk of heart disease because of the energy function of MCT oil as well. Keep MCT consumption below 30%, although, because of dietary fat. It can increase fatty liver long-term, citing animal models, and it can increase hunger as well. So there's a caveat here. MCT is, you can't go willy-nilly on this oil. I would recommend it, but 2 tablespoons, that's pretty much it. That's the extent of it. Upwards of 4 tablespoons, that's it. You can't have this be the main fat source simply because of these animal models, and you want to check liver enzyme counts and fatty liver just to make sure that everything is okay while on MCT oil. But if you're in normal ranges, there should be no issues whatsoever with MCT. Now, the use of exogenous ketones. A lot of studies happening here. I tried to be as recent as possible. EK for short, exogenous ketones. 2017 study investigated the effects of exogenous ketones on human metabolism. Researchers asked 15 healthy participants to consume drinks that contain either ketone esters or ketone salts. Both types of ketones induced a state of ketosis in the participants. I can't get into the esters and salts. There are 2 different types of ketone formulations that can be consumed, but it's too long to explain in this scenario. Exogenous ketones for improved athletic performance. Authors of a 2016 study note that exogenous ketones act as an alternative energy source for the body during excessive intensive exercise. As such, they help reduce lactic acid production. Those of you that have taken my course know that lactic acid is not an athlete's friend. And anything that can reduce lactic acid production, specifically for endurance athletes, is a godsend. So exogenous ketones are on the brink of becoming very popular. And I would say give it another 2 to 4 years, and there's going to be more talk about exogenous ketones. Very exciting. The study results suggest that exogenous ketones could improve a person's athletic performance by about 2%. The people most likely to benefit from this increase are elite and endurance athletes. Most definitely, because endurance, what are you burning? You're burning fats mainly. You're still burning carbohydrates, you're burning fats. You add exogenous ketones to the mix, it can help with neurological setbacks when endurance athletes are exercising for longer than 2+ hours nonstop. So that's where that athletic performance increase can certainly be applied. As well, EKs for psychiatric disorders and epilepsy, as I mentioned before, experts believe that these disorders may be partially due to the changes in metabolism that affect the brain, and the examples include changes in the release of brain chemicals called neurotransmitters, increased inflammation, and abnormal glucose metabolism in the brain. Exogenous ketones can help to moderate all of those as well. Okay. Once again, this is very recent. A 2019 review of the available research suggests that exogenous ketones affect levels of certain neurotransmitters within the brain, thus reducing some of the signs of psychiatric disease. The review authors conclude that exogenous ketone supplements to help the body enter ketosis may be an effective treatment for psychiatric diseases. That is great. And I think there's more research coming through the pipeline with exogenous ketones. Dr. Dominic D'Agostino is a prolific promoter of the ketogenic diet. And I follow his work extensively along with others. And he is working a lot with exogenous ketones, and we are going to be hearing a lot more in the future about this. Remember Dominic D'Agostino, if you want to look him up, you'll see what I'm talking about. But there is always a catch, right? The safety of using exogenous ketones, if you use too much, It can cause extreme stomach upset, can increase the risk of electrolyte imbalance, can decrease blood sugar levels. That may not be a bad thing, especially for type 2, but and exogenous ketone contains sodium, which could affect blood pressure, right? Because the ketone salts are the ones that you got to watch out for. And so that's pretty much it. I would love to thank all of you for being here tonight. I know I may have flown by the slides quite a bit, but honestly, that is literally, if you believe it or not, that is the Coles Notes version. There is so much information on this diet that I want to set the record straight. That's why I created the Keto Course, okay? And I wanted to set the record straight to make sure that research is front and center, that it's not fluff, that it's not just about weight loss, okay? This is real. And so, shameless plug, the Keto Course starts online now in these times. Tuesdays, every Tuesday starts May 26th. There's 7 sessions to the course. The time is 6:30 to 9:30. And if you want to read in further into my inaugural complete ketogenic course, the blurb is on the IHN website if you like, and read it at your leisure. And once again, thank you for joining me tonight. Julia, thank you for allowing this to happen.
Thank you, Angelo. I can assure everyone on the call that the pace at which you did tonight's webinar is a little slower because I have been in your classes. I know you have so much that you want to share. You were just bolting through absolutely everything that you could. I get it. You're very generous and you want to tell everybody everything. So thank you for everything. Now, I am going to end it there and hope that if anyone wants to join you on your program to connect with IHN. So again, thank you.
Yeah, this is great. This is the first time out for me. I'm so glad that there was no glitches and it worked out. And I hope people took away whatever they wanted to take away from this, and that they're excited. You know, we have to get out of this COVID mentality. We got to stimulate our brains with something else. And I think, you know, this topic here will enlighten a lot of people from the mundane that's been going on for the past 4 weeks. And I think when we're all out of this, we'll be all better for it. And actually, I looked up ketogenic diet and COVID-19. And there was one rat study that was done. It was very interesting, that reduced flu symptoms in half the time. Now, I know COVID-19 is not the regular flu. It's totally different. But to stimulate the immune system like that by using high fat is very interesting. And I know it's one animal study. You can't hang your hat on that. But hey, who knows? After this virus is over, there could be more research on this diet related to this. So who knows? Stay tuned. That'll be interesting.
Very good. Yes, and on that happy and current note, thank you very much.